for Clackamas County. So I appreciate everybody's patience with me as I transition into this new role. But with that, I'll hand it over to our co-chairs to kick the meeting off.
Okay, well, good evening. Taking the lead on this evening, so we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Find that you've got to throw up on the screen there for all of us. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of
the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you all. Quick, here is Brian. My name is Brian Hodson. I'm your co-chair for this lovely group of excellent county elected officials. I think also on the executive committee for this group, as well as the Region 1 Act on Transportation. So I will go around here as best I can. And Martin, you're up, sir.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Martin Myers. I'm the C4 CPO rep. I finally got my moniker set out correctly so everybody can see who I am. Good to see everyone.
Thanks, Martin. Commissioner Mitchell.
Mike Mitchell, Oregon City Commission, and I'm filling in tonight for Commissioner Morrow.
Perfect, thank you. Commissioner Savas.
Paul Savas, Clackamas County Commissioner and co-chair of C4, along with my good friend, Mr. Hodson, Mayor of Canby.
Yes, sir. Mr. Cernak.
Kenny Cernak. I'm on the board for the Hamlet of Beaver Creek, representing Hamlets.
Carolyn.
Carolyn Berry, City of Wilsonville. I'm the alternative for C4 Committee for Wilsonville and filling in for Julie Fitzgerald, Mayor, who may be coming later.
Miss French.
Oh, thank you. Sherry French, Clackamas Riverwater.
Thank you. Mayor Milch.
Michael Milch, Mayor of Gladstone.
Very much. Glad to have you. Mr. Brashear.
Good evening, everyone. Dwight Brashear. I am the Transit Director for SMART, City of Wilsonville, representing the urban transit providers.
Perfect. Thank you. Councilor Sherman.
Good evening, Brett Sherman, Happy Valley City Councilor.
All right. Mr. Mayor Joe Buck.
Thank you, Mayor. Joe Buck, Mayor of Lake Oswego. Good evening.
Like a good baseball name, like something you just hear over a large stadium. Now batting, Joe Buck. Todd Wood, another good short announcer name.
Todd Wood, Canby Area Transit Director, representing small transit providers.
And a fine job Todd does. We just approved, we're building a new building for, aren't we, Todd?
Well, we're designing a new building. We'll have to come back for the money to build the building later.
All right, well, we'll do this. And then blacked out is Mr. Wilson. I think he's here. Oh.
Trent Wilson, Government Affairs at Clackamas County, and the proud fan of a World Series winning baseball team, since we're talking about baseball.
Thanks. Appreciate that. I've been notified by my co-chair that my audio is a little scratchy. I apologize for that. I will do my best here to try to articulate, see if I can fix the problem here midstream. So, okay. Piece this evening, approval of the minutes for October 25th.
And Co-Chair, I just want to step in and just acknowledge real quick an administrative housekeeping item. The packet included the member list from 2022, so I appreciate a couple of folks that flagged that for me. We have corrected that, and it will be updated on the website once we approve the minutes from today.
Looks like
Did we
Mayor Hodson
lose?
may have frozen, but I'll move to accept the minutes as revised.
Thank you.
I'll second approval.
All right, appreciate that. We take a moment to hopefully have him back, log back in. Commissioner Salmas, can you take over?
Who log in?
Our co-chair. Looks like we lost him.
Looks like I can see Mayor Hodson again.
Oh, there we go.
All right, gang. I'm not sure what happened there. So I'm sorry, did we get it?
First from Sherman, second from Myers.
Any discussion or comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, anyone opposed? All right, seeing none, all right. Next piece of the agenda. Update.
And we're gonna pull in some folks from our H3S department. Let me pull them in right now. And Vahid, I have your presentation, but you're welcome to go ahead and present yourself if you'd like, if it's easier for you.
Why don't I do that? Good evening, everyone. I'm Vahid Brown. I'm sorry I was coming on. If I was introduced before, I'm repeating my introduction. My name is Vahid. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Deputy Director of Housing and Community Development for Clackamas County. I have a brief update about our plan to post some of the exciting outcomes from our housing work on the website in a dashboard. So I'm going to give an update about that. And while I'm at it, tell you about some of those outcomes. He gave me a little bit of time, so I use it to the best effect and celebrate some of the great work that our partners are doing. Let me pull up my PowerPoint slide. Is everyone seeing that?
Yes.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. So I'm going to talk about our housing services program, which would be the subject of the dashboard that I'm here to give an update about. What we would want to show in this dashboard is kind of high-level overall outcomes of the work that the county is doing to ensure that homelessness here is rare, brief, and non-recurring. That's the goal that we're all driving towards, that homelessness is rare. It doesn't happen very often in Clackamas County. When it happens, it's brief, where we have the resources and programs to ensure people are housed quickly, and that once folks are housed, they do not return to homelessness, non-recurring. And so far, we're on track to meet this goal, and some of the statistics and text on this slide attest to that. Across our housing programs, less than 5% of people over the course of a year after placed in permanent housing lose that permanent housing. In our permanent supportive housing programs, a type of program I'll talk a little bit more about in a second, 98%, more than 98% of participants remain successfully housed a year after being placed. The measure of success in that kind of housing program is 85% nationally. So we are doing very well at ensuring that the people that we're serving with our housing programs are remaining in housing successfully at a much higher rate than is sort of the bench line for national success. We're also somewhat unique in Oregon on the West Coast in having a year over year trend line of reductions in the overall number of people experiencing homelessness as counted in our point in time counts every January. A 31% decrease between 2022 and 2023 in our point in time counts, and a 49% decrease overall in the number of people experiencing homelessness found in the counts between 2019 and 2021. So those are really positive trends. Those, as I said, are somewhat unique. We are not seeing significant overall reductions in the numbers of people experiencing homelessness in Oregon as a state. Clackamas County is standing out in this regard. This is an example of what a dashboard would represent, and these are really remarkable outcomes. These are from the previous fiscal year. So numbers of people who are either were placed in permanent housing, had evictions prevented, received rent assistance, or spent time in a safety off the streets or shelter program between July 1 of 2022 and June 30th of 2023. Not all of these are outcomes in programs funded by the Supportive Housing Services Program, but many of them are, and I'll break those down in a second. But overall, this is a picture of what we would want to track on a quarterly basis and update at least quarterly. So the outcomes across these axes, the number of people placed in permanent housing, the number of people who receive eviction prevention, the number of people who receive rent assistance, and the number of people who access shelter services. And those are the actual numbers from the previous fiscal year. Permanent supportive housing, permanent housing placements. Permanent supportive housing is the cornerstone of the Supportive Housing Services Program. And before I continue, I want to acknowledge that Caroline has a question, and I apologize, Caroline. I should address you as commissioner, but I missed that part of the introduction.
You can call me Carolyn. And I didn't mean to interrupt, but I did have a question. Those numbers that you just gave us, so like the permanent housing number of 1576, is that head of household, or is that including adults and children, or what do those numbers represent?
That's a very good question, because sometimes we report by household and sometimes by people. These numbers are people, the people in the household, including children.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks for that clarifying question. Permanent supportive housing, Mr. Gronke.
Hey, just a quick question. Those are very impressive numbers. What criteria do you use to admit people to the program?
It varies by program type. Going from the right, anyone experiencing homelessness is admitted into emergency shelter programs. And a lot of the numbers in that 2,500 there on the right side of the screen are people who accessed emergency shelter in response to air quality from smoke, extreme heat and extreme cold, or inclement weather in the winter. So there are no, there is no eligibility criteria to access those types of services. And not everyone accessing them is experiencing homelessness. We have some neighbors that access the warming shelter, for example, in some of our rural communities, who don't have electricity or heat in their own homes, and access those shelters when they need to access heat. But in general, those are, if you show up to receive shelter from the elements, you're welcome to come in. So that's the sort of the lowest barrier. As you move to the right, there are more and more criteria that determine the eligibility of the household to receive the services. So for rent assistance, and rent assistance includes permanent rent assistance, long-term rent assistance, that has the highest barrier. For the Supportive Housing Services Funded Rent Assistance Program, you must be currently experiencing homelessness or have a demonstrated risk of experiencing long-term or frequent episodes of homelessness, and have a disabling condition, and have an income that's less than 50% of the area median income. Now, for folks who are receiving emergency rent assistance because they've called us and said, I have a notice from my landlord that I'm behind on my rent, and if I don't get current, I'm going to lose my housing, then there are less stringent criteria. You don't have to have a disabling condition, for example. You just simply need to demonstrate certain income criteria and an imminent risk of losing your housing, and so on. But it depends. It's program by program. Not all of these programs have the same eligibility, and some of those eligibility criteria depend on the funder. But I'm also happy to answer this question in more detail in correspondence if you would prefer, Mr. Gonke. And did someone else have a question? I'm sorry. No. Okay, I'll continue. So I was going to talk about permanent supportive housing. Permanent supportive housing is often called PSH. I think I've talked about this type of program with you all before, but real briefly, this is the most effective intervention for people who are experiencing long-term or frequent episodes of homelessness, also known as chronic homelessness. It's critical that it's not simply deeply affordable housing, but affordable housing with services. And that's what the supportive means in permanent supportive housing. Services are broadly construed. It's not a specific type of service. It depends on the household, and we invest in our community-based partners so that they have the types, range, and scope of services available to them and in their sort of Rolodex to meet the needs of these households. That might mean in-home healthcare services. We might connect with the Department of Health, the Department of Human Services, and our health system partners to get someone signed up for in-home health services. It could mean recovery-oriented services, so getting connected with support for addiction, substance use disorder and addiction and recovery, or getting back into the workforce, so employment services. Permanent supportive housing outcomes this past year are stellar. 665 people were placed in permanent supportive housing programs in Clackamas County. 1,576 overall placed in permanent housing, but that 665 were with supportive housing services funded PSH programs, or permanent supportive housing programs. And these include the bond funded programs like the one pictured in the center. That's the Tequila Springs permanent supportive housing building in Gladstone. Eviction prevention looks like a lot of different things as well. Not everyone needs short-term rental assistance to prevent an eviction. We do provide that. In some cases, people need some support, peer supports. Peers are folks with lived experience and backgrounds that are similar to the communities that they serve. And sometimes people might be new to being housed after a long experience of homelessness, new to paying a utility bill and having to figure out the internet or something like this. We also have mediation services that we partner with mediators through a pilot program funded through Resolution Services. Sometimes the incident that leads to someone losing their housing is a neighbor-to-neighbor conflict, or a neighbor-to-property manager, a neighbor-to-landlord conflict. And mediation is necessary and not necessarily financial assistance. Overall, 643 people were helped in SHS, Supportive Housing Services funded eviction prevention programs, 1,459 across all programs. Long-term rent assistance, that is the core financial housing support for our permanent supportive housing programs. In the SHS funded program, it's called the RLRA program, Regional Long-Term Rent Assistance. 676 people were served in the fiscal year with regional long-term rent assistance vouchers. And every one of those households receives not only the voucher, but supportive services, which at the very least looks like a housing case manager, which checks in with that family on a weekly basis. 2,872 people received some type of rent assistance in the fiscal year. And then safety off the streets, before I go there, Mayor Hodson. Let me go back.
Thanks, Pete. Appreciate it. So when we talk about the 2,900 people in all rent assistance programs, that is just in Clackamas County, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then do we count each person or each family that gets assistance one time or every time they get assistance?
That's a good question. I believe this is deduplicated. These are deduplicated numbers, so counted one time, but I would have to ensure that that's 100% accurate. It's possible that one of our rent assistance programs is operated by the rent assistance team and social services. It's possible that someone might call in January with a need for rent assistance and then call again in December and be counted twice. I do believe these are deduplicated numbers though, but I'll need to follow up to ensure that that's the case.
Great, thank you.
And then safety off the streets programs. This looks like the Veterans Village, the picture there. That's a great photograph. I wonder how we got that picture. Motel-based transitional housing programs for folks who are exiting incarceration and need supportive housing for addiction and recovery services before they move on to the next steps in their lives. And as I said, severe weather, smoke shelter, warming shelter, cold shelter. In SHS funded shelters, SHS now funds the Veterans Village and the motel-based transitional housing program. 788 people were served in those programs. And those programs are meant not just to provide a safe place off of the street, but the next step to permanent housing. The intent is that no one exits those programs unless they have house keys on the other side. But we also need to operate emergency shelter for weather that could lead to loss of life. And that's where the bulk of that 2,521 people, that's a lot of that is folks who are accessing emergency shelter. And then outreach and engagement. This is a new program for Clackamas County. We historically lacked robust outreach. We now have a coordinated outreach program with many community providers, partnerships with law enforcement, code enforcement, our cities. Outreach is now countywide. It's not limited to the metro urban growth boundary. And it is reaching hundreds of people now. And we're investing using the governor's emergency order dollars. All of the dollars that we receive from the emergency order for outreach are being focused on the rural parts of Clackamas County. Some other successes I just want to highlight before I turn it over to Adam Brown. Coordinated housing access in the past year. Coordinated housing access is this is the one point of entry to get to any of these programs. During the COVID emergency and the availability of millions of federal dollars for rent assistance so folks didn't lose their housing, coordinated housing access was inundated with calls. We were seeing many hundreds more calls a week than we would typically, and our system got overwhelmed. It was swamped, and folks were leaving voicemails. We have a commitment to respond to everyone who calls us. Unfortunately, at the height of COVID, it was taking multiple weeks to respond to people who left a voicemail. We've now cleared that problem. That is no longer the case. People are no longer leaving voicemails and waiting for a call back. We are answering the phone live. So that's great news. We're also piloting a partnership with 211 to answer that phone number after hours, on holidays, and on weekends, which is not something that we did in the past. We're also expanding our partnerships across a recovery-oriented system of care, something you might have heard of. And recently, as our board assembled a lot of local and national leaders to discuss this concept. So with SHS funding and with our partners in Health, Housing, and Human Services, we have housing case managers in our behavioral health clinics. We have certified alcohol and drug counselors on our outreach teams, and mental and behavioral health services in our PSH programs and other housing programs. And we have a focus right now on expanding rural housing programs of all kinds, from outreach to resource centers for youth and family, to permanent housing supports for folks who are experiencing homelessness in rural Clackamas County. We also had a fair amount of carryover dollars. It took us a couple of years to expand our system to grow to the point where we are now, where we're seeing the kinds of outcomes that I'm just reporting on. And so in the first 2 years of our supportive housing services program implementation, we did not spend every penny that we received from the measure. And we received a lot more money from the measure than Metro had forecast. And so our budget was overtopped with revenue that was received over the budget and over the forecast. And we've made a plan for those dollars. This set spend down plan is our Board of Commissioners emphasis on some of these are some of the areas of emphasis to make use of those one-time dollars to lean into expanding that recovery-oriented system of care. And we are currently working on a crisis stabilization center. We're expanding the transitional village community adjacent to the Clackamas County Veterans Village. We had a notice of funding opportunity and recently awarded funds for resource centers, including one in Oregon City that'll be operated by the Homeless Solutions Coalition of Clackamas County. And we have a lot to come on recovery-oriented infrastructure and capital investments there. as well as a medical respite program. We're part of a regional convening of by the National Institute of Medical Respite Care in Portland next week. And Adam, I'm going to turn to Adam now, can talk more about our city-led initiatives. But that's my presentation. I apologize if I went a few minutes over, but I'm excited about these outcomes. So, Mr. Gronke.
Before you leave the heat, as you know, I'm on the board of Bird Creek Child and Family Services, and it strikes me that many of the organizations out there, including the county, are reproducing the same services. And I'm wondering if there's any way to coordinate these so that we don't all end up chasing the same problem.
Yeah, that's a large part of what my team is responsible for doing, is to coordinate our many partners. I mean, and to ideally we have a no wrong door system that we do need to duplicate services, right? We need someone who needs help in Milwaukee to be able to get it there, and we need someone who needs help in Sandy to be able to get it there. So there needs to be a geographic distribution of different types of programs. But we also need to know what's out there and be able to coordinate across those things. We try to do that with our coordinated entry system, the coordinated housing access, so that you know that Parrot Creek is one of those programs that people can be referred to when they call us. But I hear you, and it's something that we is a focus of our work. Commissioner West. I believe you're muted, Commissioner West.
How about now?
Can hear you now.
Perfect. Thank you. There's a couple of things I hope you can touch on, and you alluded to it a little bit. But some of the people here that weren't part of the recovery summit, some of the people in this group were. I think it's important because to define what a recovery-oriented system of care is, because that term will be heard a lot. And if you don't mind, I can read the definition that we're using. And then there's a couple things I'd like you to expand on, because I think they're really epic and cool on how you guys get people the services they need. But the recovery-oriented system of care, as we define it in Clackamas County, because I believe we're about a recovery county, and I don't think that's always about addiction. It's not always about mental health, but there's a lot of people that need recovery in different aspects, and supports and safety nets. And so a recovery-oriented system of care, it's a coordinated network of community-based services and supports that is person-centered and builds on the strengths and the resiliencies of individuals, families, and communities to achieve abstinence and improved health, wellness, and quality of life for those with risk of alcohol and drug problems. And you can substitute drug and alcohol problems for other problems, and sometimes these things intersect and coordinate with one another. But when I first became a county commissioner, you told me about your CHA system, and I think it's a really awesome patient, I will call them patients because I'm a nurse, but patient-centered or client-centered approach to prevent people from falling through the cracks. And could you expand a little bit on our CHA system and how kind of unique our outreach is, and how it is essential to our good outcomes? Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner West. Absolutely. And for those who don't know, CHA is the Coordinated Housing Access. It is not just a phone number, although it is a phone number. So CHA is a number that folks can call to say, hey, I need help of a wide variety of things. And we will, we have experts that are empathetic listeners whose first goal in that conversation is to do creative problem solving with that household, while gathering information about what their needs are and who they are, where they are, and where they're coming from. And from that information, we have what we call a by name list. And that is, like it sounds, a list by name of everyone who is in need of those services in the community. And we have a team of staff with community partners that gather on a weekly basis to, yes, I can post that phone number. Thank you, Commissioner Savas. To kind of triage, to case conference every name on the list. That includes all of our day centers and outreach partners. They're in that call every week. Our our street outreach partners are in contact with and know personally many of the folks experiencing unsheltered homelessness in the community in real time, and they're able to provide input on the information, real-time information about the status of that household, so that we prioritize by vulnerability. The folks that are most in need today are going to be put to that top of that list and referred to programs or services immediately. We don't operate wait lists anymore. That used to be the model. We had so few resources to help people in need of our programs that if someone called, the outcome of that phone call was, you're eligible for this wait list, we'll be on the list, and when a slot opens in that program, we'll be in touch. And that might mean we're not in touch with you again, and you leave the county or you pass away. We had in some cases in some of our programs so few resources that slots opened a handful a year, and we do not do that anymore. With our CHA program, we're dynamically prioritizing people, connecting them to programs in real time. We don't put them on a wait list. We put them on an active by name list that is worked by my team of staff on a weekly basis to connect folks to care. And that includes our behavioral health partners. So it includes our law enforcement partners. So we're bringing information and the health system. So we have folks that are able to look into, emergency department utilization, time in jail, whether someone was receiving services in Multnomah County, and whether they were visiting our behavioral health clinic and are engaged in care. All critical information that we use to coordinate the best outreach to those households. And Valerie Pratt.
Hi, I had two separate questions. My first one is I noticed a lot when you're talking and in your packet, you talk about crisis stabilization and behavioral health and addictions and recovery. And I'm wondering, there's a certain sector of the population, they're just not going to ever fully recover. And do you have services for those people that will probably need help for the rest of their lives? And
Yeah. Some people do need long-term support and care. And our PSH programs, permanent supportive housing, is not time limited. So the rent assistance, it means that their housing is deeply affordable as long as they're in the program, and they can choose to leave, but they don't have to leave, and we won't withdraw the assistance. The same goes with the services. They're not time limited. We check in with households maybe at certain intervals to see if they still need to continue to be enrolled in case management services or other kinds of care. And if they opt out, they opt out, but it's not time limited services.
that's great. And then my second question is, I'm thinking particularly of elderly people that might be in their homes and aren't out in the community much. What kind of outreach is done to them for them to know that these services exist and how to, about the CHA, for instance?
Yeah, our CHA team does a lot of outreach to communities, to libraries. They are going to community roundtables like Sandy Connect, Estacada Connect, the North Clackamas Social Needs Roundtable. We do make an effort to ensure that our point of entry, point of access is out in the community. We don't have an outreach program per se that knocks on the doors of elderly folks living alone, but we do our best to get that information anywhere they might access it.
And all folks, I'm joining Vahid here tonight, Adam Brown, Deputy Director of Clackamas County Health, Housing and Human Services. Valerie, in addition to the homeless services specific programs, are under the purview of our department, Health, Housing and Human Services is a social services division, and they have a whole suite of senior focused programs, including a program called Senior Companion Program, Transportation Reaching People, etc., peer-based programs that are really intended to reduce isolation and promote the ability for folks to live independently. And so where needed, if people are struggling to maintain their houses, that can include connection to CHA and our homeless services system, but it also could just be providing people companionship, support, help getting to appointments, things like that. All right, and Vahid was passing it to me before we had those questions, and one of the things I was going to talk about in particular is Vahid made reference to city-led initiatives, And many of you were present at the retreat over the summer in June, and we previewed this idea at the time, sort of thinking that, you know, Clackamas County is a broad county geographically, demographically, et cetera, and our ability to make a permanent, lasting impact on people dealing with housing insecurity in a county as big as Clackamas, it's going to require geographical distribution of services, and it's going to require a shared commitment of all of the municipalities within the county working together towards the common goal. And so as Vahid and I thought about, well, how do we make that happen? How do we initiate these conversations? How do we harness some of the energy that we know is out there to help manage homelessness in our communities? We started talking about wanting to partner more with our city. The county is here as a funder, it's here as a partner, it's here with programmatic expertise, but we recognize that, you know, we don't want to necessarily be leading the initiatives or, you know, placing resource centers in specific communities. We want communities deciding how are programs structured in their community, where are service access points in their community, and really leading in a way that brings us to the table as a partner with resources and expertise, but does it in a way that works for each and every community in Clackamas County. That's both rural and urban. We know there are different needs based on the communities, and we're here as a partner to help think and problem solve on ways to address the unique needs of each jurisdiction. So Vahid spoke about the carryover balance of funds that has accumulated as our program ramps up. And our board put together a package of limited term, one-time and limited term investments to use those funds that we've accumulated. And a key component of that was what we call capital needs. And so in this area of capital needs, meaning dollars for built infrastructure, we laid out a series of priorities. We made a series of recommendations to the board about key areas that we thought we needed to make investments in. One of those areas is city-led initiatives. So in September, the board approved this list of priority investments, and that included $5 million for city-led initiatives. And we're kind of shaping up the solicitation process now, and we're starting with conversations like this, but we intend to make those resources available, both one-time capital resources and then a commitment to figuring out what the ongoing needs are, but make those resources available to fund city-led proposals. And this isn't just, you know, our SHS resources are restricted for use within the metro urban growth boundary, of course, but we also have resources that we can use in our rural communities as well. So we want everybody coming to the table. We want proposals from all of our communities on what do you need? And then we want to sit down and have conversations. How do we structure programming that'll work for you? What investments do you want to make? And so happy to take questions about that. And like I said, we're going to work on the formal process to carry out to make this happen. But this is one of the first conversations that we're having, you know, about our intent to go ahead with this process. And I want to reserve some time at the end, Brian. So give me a couple of minutes at the end after we take questions. I want to talk about what that means, particularly for our rural communities, because we have a specific strategy for those communities that we're undertaking now, and I want a chance to preview that. So happy to take questions.
Is the project in Wilsonville one example, Adam?
Yeah, and so we talked with Mayor Fitzgerald a number of months ago about, and we actually sat down with the city manager and one of their community-based organizations, and the city of Wilsonville was talking about wanting to provide infrastructure for camping, and we kind of put a placeholder in that conversation at the time. And now we hope to reinvigorate it as part of actually making the funding available. But it was, hey, you know, if you're going to set up a sanctioned camp in your community, do you need a shower trailer? Do you need bathroom trailers? What sort of built infrastructure might you need to support folks living at that site, right? There may be connections to outreach services that we can make, helping people transition to permanent housing options from that site. So that, Commissioner Savas, yes, that's exactly what we want to be working on together.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Adam? Well, very impressive thus far. So, oh, there we got some questions. Mayor Buck.
Thanks, Commissioner Savas. Thanks, Adam. I've talked to you guys before about the food pantry thing, which kind of is a common thing in a lot of in the Clackamas community, especially, and the pantry specifically the ones outside the Oregon Food Bank network. Is that, something? Just think about the great work y'all doing. It's like getting people sheltered is one huge challenge, but then people living in poverty is another challenge, right? And the work doesn't stop with shelter, and obviously that's a huge part of the program and everything. So is that something that fits into this, or?
Yeah, Commissioner Buck, I think we're certainly open to those conversations. We have to make sure that the investment is consistent with the funding requirements that we have. But I think we all can realize that if someone's living with food insecurity at that level, there's a really good chance they're at risk of housing instability as well. So, and there's modest investments that we can make in that food security that will help stabilize households. And I'll also mention that some of you may be familiar with the state's Medicaid demonstration waiver that it's working on. And that's actually going to make nutrition assistance a covered Medicaid benefit. And there's 3 facets to the demonstration waiver. It's housing support, including rent assistance and housing navigation. It is climate assistance for folks who may be living, in environments that are at risk of health consequences during a heat wave, things like that. And then there's also nutrition assistance. So over the course of the next year, as the state rolls this benefit out, we're going to have a bunch more resources for things like food security.
Okay, I'm saying, can I just say, so are those resources that are going to be coming through the county?
The state's still mapping out how the resources will come through communities, but we already know that, like with rent assistance and the housing support benefits, they're leaning heavily on the counties. We're talking with our public health partners about the climate benefits. And we think that the community action agencies and other agencies would be really good channels for things like the nutrition support. So we think that the county is going to play a role in those things. And at the very least, right now, the counties are at the table supporting the state's conversations about how those benefits are rolled out, given that those benefits aren't things that are normally administered by the health systems, right? Those are human services benefits that are going to require human services infrastructure.
So if like on the food pantry thing, would we just reach out to? This is just ad hoc, right? There's not like an application program or anything. Just reach out to you two and talk about it.
Not for this one specifically, Mayor. Like, just send me and Vahid an email. We'll problem solve with you for sure. When it comes to this other the capital investments, we intend to carry out a solicitation, but we're local governments. We can enter into intergovernmental agreements. We don't have to carry out a formal RFP process to partner with one another. So we intend this to be somewhere between a formal procurement and just conversations in this room, right? We're going to send out a memo that here's the things we're considering. We want your proposals by this date, and then we'll have subsequent conversations about those things.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Lewis.
Sure. Thank you so much. I think it's really critical in this environment that the cities get some clear answers on how they can partner and receive some of this funding, particularly for work they're already doing. I've been at 4 city commissions in my district within the past month, and every single one has asked some version of the question, how do we gain access to these funds? And I think it's just really important to recognize that, yes, the rural cities will need a process and will need, their own set of funds. But the funds are available at a magnitude within the urban area that requires, I think, an extra level of emphasis and expediency. It's going to be able, you're going to be able to deploy in cities quickly. As I said, most of them are already doing some flavor of the work. So I would just add an exclamation point to the city's program. Cities, I think, are eager. So I just want to say I got trust in them, and I trust also that you're gonna to have a good process. Thanks.
Thanks for that.
Councilor Berry.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. So one of the, I mean, it sounds really great that there's a lot of money out there and a lot of programs, and it sounds like the county's going to be really helping the homeless people and people that need assistance with recovery. But one of the questions that Wilsonville is wondering is, what are the effective steps that cities like Wilsonville can take to aid the county and its goal to get homeless people off the streets and improve their lives?
Well, that's a really great question, and that's one of the reasons that Vahid and I are here tonight. We recognize that we can't do this work without the leadership of the cities. We appreciate the venue to be here. I think there's a level of relationship building between county staff, the county, and cities over the past year that hasn't necessarily been there before. And so I would say, we came to Wilsonville City Council meeting a number of months ago, gave a presentation, talked about how we can support Wilsonville. And that led to then the conversation with the mayor, your city manager, the nonprofit in your community. And then we developed partnerships from that, right? We got them connected to the coordinated housing access system. So I think we want the communication to be two ways. We want to feel accessible to you all. We have to obviously go through our appropriate institutional channels. And I want to be mindful of that. But Vahid and I are available to come to your city council meetings, to sit down in meetings with you and your city managers, do creative problem solving. We're here for that. And so I think one of the things that you can do to support us is ask us to come to the table, lead initiatives for making investments in your communities, help us manage the, what can be complicated political neighborhood dynamics that arise when we're here trying to help, but the community might not feel that way. And so it takes really intentional engagement with the community and doing it in a way that's going to work for them. So I think the best thing you can do is ask us to partner with you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I know from my personal experience, having your presentation to us at the City Council really motivated us to, work on the unhousing camping ordinance and whatnot. That it was really valuable. So thank you.
Yeah. Adam or Vahid, could you just run down off of your top of your head the cities you have made presentations to thus far?
Let's see, we've talked with Gladstone, we've talked with Happy Valley, we've talked with Wilsonville, made a number of presentations to Oregon City, but not in the past 6 months. I think I would put Milwaukee in that regard as well, although I have spoken with the City of Milwaukee a number of times about some initiatives that they're interested in, including this morning. I'm probably missing some, Adam.
How about West Lynn?
Not made a recent presentation to West Lynn.
Okay.
Not formally, Commissioner. I know, as part of our affordable housing development activities and our housing authority, there's other presentations there as well that we might be forgetting.
That's right, Malala. We're setting up some engagement with the City of Sandy right now. Yeah, but like Adam said, we are available and very happy to come and to speak with city councils.
Yeah, years back, just a idea, but years back when our transit agencies were, they existed, but they weren't as connected and working together closely to serve citizens and these making connections from one agency or one territory or jurisdiction to another. And what we ended up doing, we just set up what was going to be, I think, an ad hoc transit subcommittee of C4 for them to coordinate amongst each other. And then that's taken off into what it is today, which has been some fantastic work. So I'm just wondering if there is either not necessarily a subcommittee, but if that's an option, but at least establishing a point of contact for these kinds of services within your city staff. Because we know who Vahid is, we know who Adam is, they're all reachable. And but if there's a point of contact in your city that would be, the person assigned, that might ease or help assist with communications. So, any other questions for Vahid or Adam? Commissioner West.
One other thing I think is because this all is kind of the county's done a lot in the last this year regarding this issue, and the things I think would be beneficial is to share the results of the summit. So like the recommendations from the recent summit, a number of you guys were there. Sorry, I'm in a semi-public place over here. Many of those recommendations also will give you a little bit of a roadmap about like what we're considering policy-wise on a larger scope and how we address this. I know that Commissioner Savas and I and others have had conversations is traditionally a lot of the public health has been distributed and done at the county level, and the cities have been isolated away from that. But under a recovery-oriented system of care, it's all hands on deck. It's a full community effort to deal with this, right? So that's one of the reasons why we wanted to make sure that we were engaging with our 16 different cities to get on the same page to deal with the urgency of the crisis. And you guys know your individual unique communities better than anybody else. And so that power of local government and making sure we're all stakeholders in this. So that's kind of the reasons why I think being a little innovative with some of the funding we have is to help cities out and to be more locally based. And then the other thing is look at that summit results. A lot of the roadmap of maybe where we're going as a board of commissioners is in that summit, in that report.
Yep, and I just shared that report in the chat for you all to check out. And then Brian, I know we're over time. I want to give one last little nugget of something that we're going to be working on before you all transition to regional transportation plan stuff. And this is the notion of our rural area planning. And so we've talked a lot about the SHS funds being available for use within the urban growth boundary. And there's a really important opportunity that we have with regard to that influx of resources. It means that we can take all of our other local, state, and federal funds, and we can reposition them outside of the urban growth boundary to meet rural community needs. That's exactly what we have done with the governor's emergency order funds. We built new outreach programs. We've got new rapid rehousing programs focused on rural communities. And now, just today, I got an update from the state on 5511, which provides ongoing funding for the next biennium and then hopefully beyond to sustain these services. And so with this repositioning of resources from the urban area to our rural communities, and then with the additional investments that we'll be able to make with the emergency order funds, we're engaging and basically a rural area needs assessment and strategic plan. So we're working with a technical assistance provider called Focus Strategies, and Focus Strategies is going to support our engagement with the rural communities. We're going to start slow and engage with the elected leaders and city officials in these rural communities, and then take their guidance on what additional engagement can we do to assess gaps in those communities to meet the needs of people from those communities and people living in those communities. Because the best thing that we can do to support Clackamas County as a whole is to meet needs where they exist and prevent, this notion of squeezing the balloon to one place or another. And so we're really excited about this opportunity to support our rural communities. So for the rural area leaders in this room, over the coming month, 6 weeks, be on the lookout for communications from us calling you to the table to help with this strategic plan. This isn't us prescribing anything as a county. It's really intended to be led by you and informed by you. So if it helps, fine. If not, that's fine too. We want to know one way or another what you want from the county, and this is intended to facilitate that process and shape the sort of future of our engagement on this issue in rural communities. Martin?
Martin.
Yeah, just real quick, I want to ask and make sure that this is not just oriented towards the rural cities, although they certainly need help. There's also the problems in the unincorporated rural areas, and I wanted to make sure that they're at least at that table in some way, be that through the CPOs or something else, that allows us to hear about what's being done in the unincorporated areas too. Thank you.
Yeah, Martin, you got it. And of course, there's more unincorporated rural area than there is city rural area, right? The unincorporated areas will absolutely be at the table.
Yep. And Adam and Vahid are the direct point of contact for those unincorporated areas. So, well, thank you both, Adam and Vahid, for your presentation. Those are great numbers, great success. And maybe just a suggestion, maybe you could reach out to each city, email, if you could, to at least ask the city manager for a point of contact, so that we have a log of every point of contact for each jurisdiction. And I would actually put that out to special districts if they have any involvement, at least for contact anyhow, that I wouldn't not include any kind of district or any other member of this group. So all right, well, we're a little bit behind on the calendar. Brian, bring us what's next.
We have a RTP update from Karen and Jamie, who should be in the room now.
Right. Good afternoon, or actually good evening, C4 members. I am Karen Burig. I'm the Long Range Planning Manager at Clackamas County, and I'm also the Clackamas County TPAC representative. And with me tonight is Jamie Lorenzini, who is the TPAC member that represents the cities of Clackamas County. So we wanted to be able to talk with you tonight about the Regional Transportation Plan, the 2023 Regional Transportation Plan. As you may recall, back in August, we brought before you a letter, and you as an organization sent a letter to Metro identifying some key issues around the Regional Transportation Plan. This is a project, the 2023 RTP is a project that's been underway for the last few years. There's been a variety of presentations, engagement activities, work by staff to really put together a whole suite of amendments to policies and different actions, but also the Regional Transportation Plan includes specific projects that are anticipated to be completed in the next 20 years. And those projects are put into a list, and they're actually put into a list that those that we think will be able to be it's a kind of a constrained environment, as well as a more strategic environment. Those are the projects that we would hope to get done if we were able to find more money. So it's actually a fairly complicated document, and we're right at the last stages of that process. One thing that's really important to note is that having an adopted RTP is essential to be able to keep federal transportation funding flowing. And to have the adopted RTP, currently the date is December 6th, that Metro Council needs to have an approved RTP in order for us to continue to receive the flow of funds. So it's getting to the real interesting part. So we are in this part of going through the various committees on getting recommendations related to approval of the RTP. One of the things before I kind of go into that, I did want to note that the letter that was sent by C4 really did shape the policy topics that were the focus of the last few meetings of conversation. Because as you may imagine, there are many different things and variety of different changes that were made to the RTP. Actually, during the public comment period, they received, I think, over 700 comments. If we look in the comment log, there's over 700 comments upon which each was responded to individually. And so a lot of work has been done, but really the items that we have ended up really focusing on, there have been 5 items that policy items that we have been focusing on in the last few meetings. So with that, there have been a series of recommendations. It's a really interesting process for those of us involved because the regional transportation plan not only has a federal role, but it serves as the regional transportation system plan for the state, and which, because of that, there is both the JPAC recommendation, but also MPAC makes a recommendation. And so JPAC, as you may be aware, is the Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation, and MPAC is the Metropolitan Policy Advisory Committee. And typically that group really focuses on land use recommendations straight to Metro Council. And each of those groups have a staff advisory committee that provides recommendations to those groups. So to date, the Metropolitan Transportation Advisory Committee, MTAC, which is a staff level committee, discussed the recommendations and made a recommendation to MPAC. And MPAC provided a recommendation that was built off of that initial staff recommendation, and that occurred last week. And tonight, what we're hoping for is that we'll have an ability to both hear from the MPAC representatives about that conversation, as well as the JPAC representatives. But I would like to just really call out that there were a lot, and this is also in your memo, but some of the key items that were brought forward by MPAC was the need to clarify ODOT's responsibilities in the region regarding to pricing and memorializing the letters of agreement around pricing that have been previously agreed to by ODOT. So that was incorporated in. There were also some amendments related to the project description around the I-205 project and really clarifying the safety elements. And then finally, another amendment that was brought forward and is included in the MPAC recommendation is the intent to encourage ODOT to continue regional engagement. And by doing this, what the amendment was to remove all of the phases of the regional mobility pricing project, except for the preliminary engineering. Keep the preliminary engineering phase within the constrained list and move the remaining to the strategic list. And just so for those of you who aren't just seeped in RTP, really that particular action causes the need for another amendment to the regional transportation plan before the project can move from its NEPA phase into construction phase. That's a real high level explanation of that. So since the MPAC meeting, which was just last week, Jamie and myself have been working to coordinate with our other jurisdictional partners at the staff level to kind of understand their thoughts about the MPAC recommendation and see what sort of the reactions are, because Jamie and myself will be talking about the recommendation that goes to JPAC tomorrow. So we were trying to really get a feel for where the other jurisdictions are at. And really what we found is that there's been the most concern about the changes to the regional mobility pricing project, and splitting that project into two different, into the constrained list and the strategic list. So, and just to give you a feel of what those, concerns were, first of all, there's been a lot of questions, just more technical questions about whether or not NEPA can be completed within, certain phases. And there's a lot of rules that FHWA has around what needs to be in one list and needs to be in the RTP and what phases and whatnot. And so there were many questions that the different partners had. Another element that they had questions about was how this would actually impact the schedule of the regional mobility pricing project. And the fact that in the past, there had been this interest in aligning both the I-205 project and the regional mobility pricing project, and would this keep them out of alignment, and different things like that. And then finally, the last concern was really about whether or not this was setting a precedent for one jurisdiction to go in and make a change to another jurisdiction's project kind of right at the end of a process. And so with that, we, as around the region, I think we didn't come to a solid answer to any of those questions, because again, this was kind of a lot of different things going on over the last week. So what I'm hoping tonight is, again, the different representatives from MPAC and JPAC can have an opportunity to really have the conversation about the outcomes that they really want to achieve with the ultimate adoption of the RTP, and any other things that they want to talk about. Because again, Jamie and I will be meeting tomorrow with TPAC, and then JPAC will be making its recommendation on November 16th. So that was a whole lot. I think that Jamie is also here to answer questions. If you have any other things that you want to add before we really open it up to broader questions and just conversation of the different members around the table.
Yeah, I'll sum everything up by saying that if this was a flight, we are approaching the descent of this flight. We have 3 more bites at the apple before the RTP lapses. So we've got TPAC on Friday, JPAC in a week and a half, and then the Metro Council on the 30th. The insider baseball side of this equation is, MPAC is making a recommendation, and JPAC both go to the Metro Council. The MPAC recommendation is advisory, but JPAC and the Metro Council are jointly the MPO and must pass, to my understanding, mirror versions of the document. So when the JPAC recommendation goes to Metro Council, they can either accept JPAC's recommendation or vote no and send the JPAC recommendation back to JPAC for additional work. In the case of the latter, that would prompt the RTP to lapse, and that would cause our federal funding to expire. So there's subjectively seems to be a lot of pressure to get this right the first time. So what comes out of JPAC will be incredibly important. Are there any questions?
Yeah, more comment than a question. I think, I mean, you've both laid out a very thorough description of kind of the conversations that have been going on to date. And I think, as part of the MPAC conversation, some of the recommendations were a bit administrative in nature, but had really specific, very important implications. Things like leaving the RMPP off the list of projects that they would be accountable for. While it was probably just an inadvertent miss, the implication of not having that as part of the list of kind of overarching projects is pretty important. I think you know, most of the information that was incorporated, most of the alterations were really specifically in alignment with the letter of agreement between Director Strickler and President Peterson. And so memorializing that as part of this, really, there wasn't much that was actually, at least in my mind, debatable about that, because it was an agreement that was already in place. So you know, maybe there's some semantics about how the RTP can be used, but you know, the notion of local jurisdictions having input in where tolling revenue is deployed, that's an important part of this entire process. So, you know, kudos to staff for kind of navigating this process and helping us really identify a lot of these key pieces to be incorporated in this documentation. I guess the pushbacks we've had, you know, I think it can be aren't as substantial as I would have originally expected, and I was really surprised and you know, by the broad acceptance by MPAC across the board, that the participants really fully embracing and accepting every single one of these recommendations. So there was really very minimal response to it. You know, maybe Hillsborough didn't like you know, the PE phase being brought into kind of discussion, but other than that, I thought that it went really well. I hope that we're able to continue to move the ball forward on this, you know, as the document's been drafted at this point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Counselor. Mayor Buck.
Thanks, Commissioner Savis. Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Jamie. I just so to tell everyone, the TPAC team, and I see Jamie Stasny in the attendees list here too. They just did a fantastic job putting together this information for those of us, you know, representing Clackamas County at the impact table, and Councilor Sherman, Commissioner Scholl, and myself are those three Clackamas folks. And well, and Ms. French, I know that you were there for a short time too, doing your best to vote no on everything. Just so, but I just want to thank you all for the great job that you did. This, I mean, honestly, this document, this RTP thing is so complicated and so long. And I know that we've heard reports on this that I don't even know how many C4 meetings and C4 Metro meetings, you know, but it still remains. It's just very technical. And I mean, we could all dedicate our entire time that we spend doing our public service work just focused on the RTP and still only know a tiny amount of it. So I just want to thank you all for the work that you did. What I mean, I saw our Clackamas County's comments, you know, coming out of this. I think we're obviously for years have been very concerned about our engagement with ODOT and the plans ahead in regards to tolling and transportation funding. I think we're optimistic about the conversations the legislature is going to have, but there's still confusion. You know, we have the legislature talking about comprehensive transportation funding in 25, but we have ODOT moving ahead with the purchase of gantries right now, you know, and so it's like, well, what's this comprehensive conversation we're going to have with, there's other aspects that don't quite make sense. Like ODOT has put the kibosh on the I-205 expansion project in light of the kind of pause on tolling. They say, well, now their budget's in disarray. It's like, well, no tolling, no project. Well, I mean, how does that impact the rest of you? Why can't you plow the roads down in Bend? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So there's a lot of questions to be asked. I know people have a lot of questions about the RMPP. People that sit around the tables don't understand the RMPP. And so that's, you know, I made that motion to kind of separate out these different elements of the RMPP to really, I think that we as community members are using all the tools that we have at our disposal to force, because we have found through this process, we don't have that many tools apparently when it comes to ODOT. And it's been difficult for us to even get seemingly the state to, I mean, except for the governor's last minute intervention to intervene. So I think we're using the tools that we have to use, which right now is this RTP, to ensure continued engagement from ODOT on these really impactful transportation plans that don't seem yet fully baked or understood or understood. When it comes to a project like the RMPP, I mean, for me personally, it's like, well, I mean, I-205, there is no I-205 project right now. So in regards to the timing of I-205 and the RMPP, it's like, well, you know, who knows? Who knows? The RMPP doesn't have a list of projects attached to it aside from the RMPP itself. I hear the concerns about, not editing, the constrained list. I'll note that, this is a recommendation. I don't know what Metro Council and JPAC have the general authority. So, I mean, no one has unilateral ability to wipe a project off the list, right? I mean, these are recommendations. A body has to take a vote. If there was editing it, that's going to be a thing that's going to be affirmed by both JPAC and the Metro Council. So there's a lot of voices. I would imagine that if a project gets edited, that's really saying something about the level of concern the region has about that project. I mean, we of course wouldn't want, any one city just having one voice being able to edit the constraint list. So anyway, those are my comments, but thank you all again for your great your help preparing us for these conversations.
Well, you guys were highly successful. I think, as Councilor Sherman mentioned, all your recommendations were approved, so that's success. So good work. Any other comments? Karen, is anything you want to follow up on, or Jamie?
I don't think so. I think that we'll be able to represent the county appropriately. I do think that there's going to be quite a bit of navigating through that one particular item on the RMPP, but we're really going to do what we can to make sure that JPAC has the ability to talk about that particular project and kind of give guidance to Metro Council on their kind of view on how the RMPP should be handled.
Okay. Excellent. Well, you're on time, even though we got you started a little bit late, or still a little bit late, but you did well. Any other comments? Oh, Mayor Milch.
I'm just wondering about that, the suggestion to amend the project description of the I-205 toll project to remove statements about the apparent safety benefits of tolling. And to what extent this got in there. Do we have an official document now stating that tolling is detrimental to public safety, both the local level and the highway level? Because that would seem to carry some weight as to how far that project proceeds. How did that comment get incorporated into the reports that were generated?
Yeah, I can jump in here.
Go for it. Go ahead, James.
Okay, super. My understanding is that originally Metro asked for that information to be included in the project description. What came out of MPAC, my understanding or interpretation is that there are questions whether or not the statements that were included were fully representative of the range of impacts that could occur on our local system. And so the information was removed. Does that clarify? Okay. And if I can maybe steal a few more moments. Heading into tomorrow, I do anticipate that clarifying amendments will be brought to the table. I've heard in the wind some possible amendments that could occur, but nothing has been necessarily confirmed yet. Outside of Karen, an email you and I received from Eric Hess. Additionally, and I will point out in your packet material tonight under what I'll call the Sherman Amendment, for lack of a better term, there is some, oh yeah, I see you, Counselor. There is information about memorializing the idea of work toward a revenue sharing agreement with regard to tolling, which is something to perhaps be aware of. I know there's still some work that needs to be done around the extent that our region can place expectation on ODOT or the OTC to have conversations about a revenue sharing agreement. So more information to come.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. One thing in general, and this is just my political or my experience, Mayor. And it was about 2 weeks ago, I met someone, one of the constituents that sits on one of the transportation committees. I met him out on the 10th Street and Willamette Falls Drive in West Lynn. So we met on the corner to watch the traffic go through at 4:30 in the afternoon during rush hour. And it's obviously a mess there. Anyone who's there at that time of day knows. And there was practically an accident right there in front of us. And I would be safe to say that at least 75%, at least, of the traffic that we watched go by would have been otherwise interstate traffic diversion going through that area. And it creates safety issues all around that area. So anything that has a potential to increase diversion or not address the existing diversion is not really dealing with or moving to solve the current safety issues we have today, let alone the ones that'll be amplified by further diversion induced by people avoiding tolls. I think that's the overall concern. So I think people in West Lynn or in some of those very dangerous areas are really, really concerned. I know I am, that we find a way to get ODOT to recognize the current safety issues with diversion and anything that they add to it. And I haven't seen that adequately addressed yet in any mitigation projects. So that's my 2 cents. Okay, anything else, folks, for the good of the order? I think we can still be on time here. Great work, Jamie. Great work, Karen. Mayors, counselors, staff, y'all did well. And we'll just look forward to the next round. Good luck tomorrow. Okay, Brian, put us back on track.
Yes, indeed. We have Trent up to provide a legislative update.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate that. Really fun to be here again in a similar but different role. Very surreal. I'm here today to talk about the upcoming legislative session and some things that are relevant for Clackamas County to be mindful of. I can go through this pretty quick because there are a few high-level things and then something a little bit more in the weeds. And what I just put in your chat is something that I'm going to reference here in just a minute. It'll be the bulk of probably all your work in the month of November, if we have our way with it. So I guess just at a very high level, it remains a little unclear if there will actually be a full session in February. Some of the issues from the 2023 session that led to the walkout, some of those issues still remain. And there's a lot of questions around what will happen with those absences for those senators that chose to go past the magic number and are no longer able to run for election. And so that is creating a lot of question marks about, will there actually be an effective legislative session in 2024? I think, but all signs point to the fact that they will go through the motions, bills will be released, they will hold those early stages of the session, and then we're all crossing our fingers that people show up to work to make it possible. That being said, we know that the session was able to come back together in 23 because of a lot of different compromises. And so we are, I think, to an optimistic degree, expecting some of those compromises will have remained in place to move a couple of bills that didn't get passed in 23 and try to move some of it in 24. The economic forecast remains pretty positive as well. And so money has a fun way of bringing people back to the room. So that's always positive, and we'll keep an eye out for that. The main topic, and you probably read it in the news or talk about it yourselves with your councils or different groups, is going to be work around Measure 110. So that will also be a primary topic for the state legislature. Right now, there is an interim committee on addictions and community safety response. They are working right now to come up with what will probably be the proposals for the state session, for the short session. And I think their goal, this is just speculative, but it's everyone's speculation. Their goal is to try to get ahead of these ballot measures or initiative petitions that might curb or change the efficacy of Measure 110 as it exists today. So it seems to me like the legislature wants to try to take a more nuanced approach to see if they can make some adjustments to maybe prevent a ballot measure from making another wholesale change or something that would be overly dramatic. Of course, beyond that, there's the special interest group that's doing a lot of work right now to try to make recommendations. And I'll just say, again, at a high level, because this affects all of our communities and even to a degree, some of the conversations you were having earlier tonight, there's a desire for tools to encourage people to pursue diversion into recovery programs. A lot of that's gone away because of how Measure 110 was introduced. So trying to find ways to get that back. Refill or just build the infrastructure to be in place for those recovery programs that weren't really in place when Measure 110 passed. So that's another piece. There's efforts by a lot of public agencies to curb or remove public consumption or public use of some of the drugs. And that's especially important for transit agencies, right? For folks who are on the bus or on the train. Well, we have a lot of transit agencies in Clackamas County, but I know this is a really big deal for TriMet, who would like to see that go away, because it really affects their operations when somebody is using those harmful drugs on the bus. Even if it's perceived to have an impact to other passengers, it creates delays, fears of using the facilities, things like that. So a lot of work will be around that. And I think a lot of work will be around those who leveling up the criminalization of those who distribute the drugs. And so the topics are pretty broad around what Measure 110 impacts will do, but it'll be the number one thing that everyone talks about here in the upcoming session, if they have it. The other thing that's probably going to linger from last year, or last legislative session anyway, are ways to continue to enhance or affect the building of new housing and the broadening of new housing. That's an extension of the governor's executive order. One of the bills that didn't pass at the end of session was House Bill 3414, I think, was called the variance bill. It provided jurisdictions the ability to sort of make moves and make small adjustments to the growth boundaries within your city or within the metro area to add housing. It was like a one-off opportunities. The governor's office has continued to work on it. It was part of the negotiation that brought everybody back into session at the end of the year. It just didn't pass because somebody didn't make it into the room on time. And so that bill is going to continue. That bill was part of the negotiation. It remains a governor's priority. The governor continues to work on it. There's new additions to it, including potentially funding for infrastructure to support the development of housing, which I think is music to all of our ears, because we know that that's not free, it's not cheap. It's something that's needed to push some of that. So that's an incredibly positive development in the drafts that we've seen of that bill so far. No surprise, another big priority for Clackamas County will be the remaining state share of the Clackamas County Courthouse. And so that was a big lift for us here in the 2023 session. We have a little bit more to go. So that will be a bulk of our work from Clackamas County's perspective. And then the prevailing topic for all of us here at C4, the thing that never goes away, just transportation and tolling. And so I'll say that really at a high level, the target is 2025, the transportation package that everybody's anticipating for 2025. And I would break that into two different things, because it's really unclear what it's going to be just yet. But it will either be a bunch of projects to build, or it will be launching a bunch of programs for the future on how we build projects moving forward. And it may be a combination of both. But it seems like that question of revenue and the revenue cliff that we're all experiencing or expecting from the gas tax going away will be the problem that's trying to be solved. And so that will take up much of the work. We've heard a lot of ideas: vehicle miles tax, tolling, cordon pricing, surcharges, sale tax. I'll say nothing's official and everything's on the table. There's just it's all draft form. It's all spaghetti on the wall. Want to highlight that there's the Association of Oregon Counties and League of Cities joint committee or task force that is working on this revenue question as well. And so I'm hoping that work eventually turns into a recommendation that gets lifted up by some committee at the state legislature. That would be, I think, a pretty positive outcome from a lot of jurisdictions who are building different pieces of the transportation system. And so if everyone's on board to start answering or having conversations around the revenue streams moving forward into the future, I think that would be a very positive way to change how we have revenue conversations in the state of Oregon, different from how some of these tolling conversations have gone, which have felt very one-sided or lopsided, as it were. So just calling those couple things out. But the real thing to be thinking about here in November is the special subcommittee on transportation planning. So harken back to May, the governor put a pause on the collection of tolls until 2026, and the state legislature created a special subcommittee on transportation planning. They had their first meeting at the end of September, and at the beginning of October, I shared with y'all a little bit about the outcomes from that meeting. That it was, again, this is the perspective of a lot of folks. It felt very, didn't feel like that subcommittee had a lot of teeth when it was described there in session. That was probably the nicest way I could say it. And then they sort of outlined a series of meetings that they want to have and a series of topics that they want to have, including, and this is really exciting for a lot of us because it's what we've been asking for as a group, including community meetings where you get to go testify. to legislators about this conversation specifically around tolling. It took a really long time for that subcommittee to produce the schedule and order of events of when all that will come out, but that has just this week posted. We now know when those community meetings will take place. The subcommittee will have a meeting next Monday at 8:30 a.m. Tune in to the legislature. And actually that link that I just put into the chat before I started talking has the link to the agenda, which will on Monday have a link to the video that you can watch or follow along with. If you can't catch it at 8:30, you can follow up afterwards. They'll have a recording. Super helpful website. So I want to draw your attention though to those 4 community meetings, 2 of which will be in or really close to Clackamas County. One will be on the morning of December 2nd. Yes, that's a Saturday from 10 o'clock to 12. Great timing. That will be the meeting for the area of Oregon City, Westland, and Gladstone. And so I can just say very candidly that Representative Hartman continues to do incredible work on behalf of the communities of Clackamas County within that subcommittee and is continuing to push for different things there. She is reaching out to staff on ways to think about how to get the right people in the room, think about what needs to be shared or said. That means that you will be hearing from me and Jamie and others from within our staff teams to help you all build towards that common language that y'all adapted and adopted over many, many meetings around tolling here at C4 to go and testify and have that unified voice. And it's nice to have that values and outcome document that you all provided your logos to earlier this year. So that's a great resource that you already have at the ready to sort of say, like, these are our values. And you remember those values at the top of them, they sort of say, we would like to see some trust and transparency in some of these pieces. It's an opportunity to talk about that gap, which I think has been a lot of heartburn for many of us during the development of this toll program so far. So December 2nd is that Westland, Oregon City, Gladstone meeting. December 14 is what have been calling the Southern I-5 meeting. That includes Wilsonville, Tualatin, Lake Oswego. And I don't know if that's going to be in Clackamas County or in Washington County. I know the line is like right there. But it'll be close enough. We'll make sure that everybody is, still in that coordination phase. And so what we have right now is the month of November, really to build a lot of the strategy. And I'm going to encourage y'all to be thinking about what y'all want to say. Staff here and we're going to work with your staff to put together some high level thematic talking points so that there's a lot of folks that we're all sort of speaking on the same page, making the same request, asking the same questions. It won't be super detailed because we'll want you to sort of tell your story within, those dates are in that agenda actually that I posted earlier. So it's part of that agenda. It has those dates and times. So good question though. So we'll be sharing that communication. And I think a big area where we'll have the next conversation for that is very likely going to be the toll strategy subcommittee in the middle of the month that group normally meets at. So that's a nice next area, but I would say be on the lookout for communication between now and then for opportunities and questions on how to prepare for those upcoming meetings, because it's also the holiday season. Again, another awkward time to put these community meetings in the middle of the holiday season, but we're going to take what we got. We're going to go and do the best that we can. I know each of y'all are passionate about the toll program, a lot of the questions that haven't been answered yet, and a lot of the concerns that you're hearing from your constituents within your community. So these 4 meetings, but in particular those 2, are those moments y'all been waiting for. Tell your people about it, get in there, and we'll try to help y'all set up as best y'all can to represent your communities in those meetings. So those are the big outcomes. The session starts on February 5. But leading up to that, we really want to be thinking about these community meetings.
Great. Councilor Pratt.
Hi, Trent. You said that second meeting in our area is on the 14th, and I've got an email from Mayor Bubenik saying it's on the 13th and that he got that from Rep Hartman. So I'm just wondering which date is correct.
I was incorrect in what I said, but what I posted in your link is that agenda. It does have December 13th for the Wilsonville, Charbonneau, Lake Oswego, Tualatin date. So thank you for catching that. December 13, Wednesday.
Okay, I just want to make sure I didn't need to update my calendar. Thank you.
Right. Councilor Lewis.
Sure. I believe the committee staff had originally told Rep Hartman and others that local electeds could be helpful in helping find a good place, etc. I'm worried they don't know how many people are going to want to come to this and they're not going to pick a large enough spot. How can we make sure that they are not excluding members of the public through their choice of location?
Yeah, I was asked the question here a couple days ago, Counselor, about, do you think that we could use, because it's a Saturday morning, the one here more locally, not the Wilsonville 12-1, but could we use the DSB, Development Services Building Auditorium? And that's sizable enough. So I don't know where that is. Maybe staff knows. And then secondly, I did see a couple text, I believe, going around about a location for Tualatin, but you're right. We need to make sure that they're sizable enough for the busloads and busloads of people that'll be coming.
So just the quick answer there is that we've been providing recommendations to Representative Hartman. That's the best that we can do. We're not in charge of the legislative subcommittee that puts all this together. She's providing those recommendations to that subcommittee and leadership on where this could potentially be. But yes, we've done our work here to try to make the DSB, where we used to have our C4 meetings in person, we may still do that in the future, try to make that space available. But we've also, had other ideas like the Westland High School gymnasium, the Gladstone High School gymnasium, are those opportunities that might have enough space on the on ramp of I-205, just in case there's no traffic, we could cone it off, anything like that.
Councilor Berry.
So Wednesday, December 13th, do we have a time?
Yes, it says 5 p.m. to 7 p.m.
Thank you.
Location to be determined.
Okay.
Commissioner West. All right, Commissioner West.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Roger that.
Wait, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, good. Sorry, I want just an idea, and it's a pretty good size space. It could probably fit, I don't know, 400 or so people, I think. Is the Charbonneau Community Center is quite large, and they would love to be engaged with the legislators on this issue. And the turnout would be phenomenal. So we haven't suggested a Charbonneau location. I think it would be a pretty good choice. Just throwing that out there.
Okay. All right, well, I think those are, like Trent stated, it's a decision that the legislature subcommittee members or their staff are gonna have to make. So we can make the suggestions, and I think we've done that. So all ears, and we'll pass that on. All right, anything else on this topic? Great, thank you, Trent. We're looking forward to it. And Brian, we got C4 and not C4, but MPAC and JPAC updates, I believe. I think we got one already from Mayor Buck. So I think we kind of covered that. And Mayor Buck and Councilor Sherman, you had a pretty good, anything else you want to add, Mayor or Councilor, about MPAC?
I don't think so.
I mean, the only other thing we covered was high capacity transit. I think one of the things that has come up numerous times is, kind of looking to create some type of structure that allows Clackamas County's tier 3 and tier 4 areas to be some criteria that allows it to be elevated in status. And so that's been a kind of a common theme that's been brought up a number of times. But that's all I've got. Thank you.
I see our good friend John Sarah, in the attendees thing. So I have to say, we were celebrating 2 decades, 20 years of what the Lakeview Village, which was kind of like a cornerstone development in downtown Lake Oswego that spurred a bunch of other redevelopment. We're celebrating it this weekend. So anyway, the paper had an old picture back from the year 2000, turn of the century, and of the property before it was redeveloped. And by golly, there were not one but 2 TriMet buses sitting right there at the intersection of Highway 43 and A Avenue. I thought, wow, so it is possible. There were buses, right? Two, not one, but 2. So
wow,
it's going to happen again. It's going to happen again.
Yeah. At JPAC, for the JPAC update, I would just add that we had pretty much the same presentation, an update on the RTP and an update on the high capacity transit. And Mayor Buck or Councilor Lewis, was there anything else of significance to point out here?
Just the letter that we're sending to the OTC.
That's right. We made some revisions to a letter about how to direct some of the funding for the $70 million, I believe, of remaining monies. And so that was sent and we got some agreement on that. So that was great. So that was sent to the OTC. And did they discuss that, what, next week?
The 9th, I believe,
Okay.
and I'm going to read it in person.
Okay, great, great. Excellent. Okay, anything else for the good of the order? Brian, do you have anything?
No, we got through our agenda. I think
Okay,
we can
well.
adjourn unless there's anything else.
Okay. Mayor Hodson, co-chair, anything from you, sir?
I have nothing at this time other than just to say I wish everyone a very safe and healthy and blessed Thanksgiving holiday coming up. So we'll see. I think we're going to meet here at the beginning of December, but yeah, please have a great holiday, everyone. There's lots to be thankful for, even in the crazy times that we have.
Indeed. Thank you for that message, Mayor. Thank you so much. All right. Well, we will adjourn, see no other further business. So thank you all. Have a safe drive home and have a safe holiday.